Hello, hello, and welcome to another episode of the show. I am Shannon,
I'm Alexis.
and this is Get Stiff.
Get Stiff is a podcast where we have conversations around grief, loss, and everything in between over cocktails. Each episode coincides with a themed cocktail, and we share the recipe with our listeners.
Today's cocktail is the No Worries. It's a fun take on the pineapple margarita. Will we love it? Will we hate it? We'll find out together. We're also very excited to have Clair Thomas in the studio with us today. Hi, Clair.
Hey.
So, if you're ready to get into it, it's time to raise a glass, take a sip, let's get stiff.
So, Claire, can you tell the people a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Who I am and what I do. Isn't that such a loaded question? So I am a content creator and yoga teacher trainer out of Las Vegas, Nevada. I am also blessed to be related to Shannon. I am one of her cousins. And I do a lot of work with the philosophical and energetic side of yoga. So while obviously I teach the yoga practice as an asana or the poses, I also focus primarily on the philosophy. That's kind of my jam.
Nice.
Now, I know you go by Blissful Clarity on the gram. I know we've all been through some pretty dark shit over the course of our lives. How did you get to that place of finding joy in your days and encouraging others to do it despite what, we all have, or what we all call impulsive or intrusive thoughts that I think just about every person has? How were you able to navigate those points in your life and get to a point where you were able to find the joy and do that for others?
I feel like this is kind of a let's go back in time question. So one of the things that is interesting is that Blissful Clarity is my IG handle, and it's relatively new because before that I was Love and Light. I had this Love and Light theme going on, and I really felt like I needed to come with this energy of love and light and be all wonderful. But at the end of the day, what I started to find was that by trying to portray this sense of like, just put love forth, just be light and kindness, it really missed an opportunity for me to be realistic about there's just some, can I cuss on this? There's just some shit that happens, right? And so just recognizing that for me, in my personal experience in life, is that I could sit with the shadow, the dark, the less, loving, less light aspects of it. And it was in those dark moments where I had to get real clear about myself and my life and the fact that there's a lot of things that are outside of my control. And I can still choose to find bliss and find clarity, even knowing that life will never be this perfectly controlled, piece of clay that I get to create into what I want.
So you're also a PQ coach, right? A certified PQ coach.
Yeah.
For those, can you tell us a little bit about what that is for folks who don't know? I know I did a little bit of like snooping, but for those who aren't really familiar, the stalking was intense. I was I know her, and I've never been this deep into the social channel.
I'm here for it. Yeah. So I went to, I got a certification through this program called Positive Intelligence. Shirzad Shamin is the founder of it. But basically, a PQ coach is a positive intelligence coach. And I'm considered a certified positive intelligence coach. And what we focus on is the idea of mental fitness over mental health. And I say that for two reasons. A of all, I am not a therapist. And so I'm not, diagnosing people with mental health issues or able to work with them on like a DSM level, right? That being said, there's the other side of there's a lot of stigma around mental health. And while I think we are becoming more and more comfortable with it, and it's becoming a better and easier part of the dialogue and conversation, at the end of the day, there are still big groups of people who have a hard time understanding mental health and being okay with getting and seeking help. Whereas with positive intelligence and with mental fitness, the focus is very similar. However, it takes off that stigma, and it takes off also this like need to have a quote unquote bigger diagnosis. And I want to be really gentle and soft when I'm saying that, because I have my own diagnoses. So I'm not judging, or I'm not shaming, or I'm not, it's nothing like that. It's just like this understanding of, I can work with you, and you don't have to tell your family that you're seeing a therapist. And for a lot of people, that's really helpful, right? The focus on mental fitness is being able to, as I was kind of sharing before, look at life's negatives, because there are things that are going to come, and there are traumas and situations, and just like life throws things at you, and being able to really essentially reframe things into this, there's a lesson and an opportunity in everything. That's really simplified, but that's the easiest way of saying it, like being able to recognize that life will happen the way it's going to happen, and I can be in control of the parts that I can control, which is how I view the things that are coming in, and how it affects my ability to continue to maneuver in the world.
Love that.
I know. I'm like, this is so new to me.
Right? I know you had mentioned that there's a lot of stigma around, mental health. And I think that that's something that we've all kind of heard, or at least seen, in terms of talking about mental health. Well, firstly, I've never heard of mental fitness. I love that. I love that kind of verbiage. I think it's great. Do you think that, we're the three of us are Black women last time I checked. And do you think that in the Black community, it's harder to approach, like there's a larger stigma surrounding mental health, or it's harder to approach that? And if so, why do you think that is? Or do you think it's pretty even across the board?
I love this question. So I can't speak to it from I haven't done the research on it, I suppose, but just within my my community, and within my family specifically, it was interesting, the reaction. So I will say I am in therapy, and I have been in therapy for getting ready to go on a year now. Gosh. And I love my therapist, and it was a great experience. Shopping for a therapist was or I call it like dating, right? Like dating for my therapist was a challenge, but it was interesting because while I was going through the process of dating for my therapist, I was having the conversations with my family and different people. And it's interesting to see like the reactions. And so to answer the question, I feel like in the Black community, there's this stigma that there's not that many Black therapists. And so that was interesting. And though my therapist is not Black, we had a very extensive onboarding conversation where the reason I think that she won me over was that she asked me point blank. She said, I am a blonde white woman, and I am not going to be able to understand the experience that you've had as a Black woman. Are you going to be okay with that? And I was like, just on account of the fact that you're willing to ask me that, we're going to be okay. Like at the very least, and so, it's been wonderful. That being said, from my own family, getting the interesting questions that came. So, do you really need therapy, or therapy can be good, or I'm really sorry for the traumas that I caused you growing up? Like this, it's almost like when you decide to go into therapy, people start to feel like it's their own a personal attack on them. And it's like, this is just a self-care, thing for me. It's really nothing to do with you. And so, so I think there's like a really long roundabout way of answering. I do think that there's stigmas, but I think that a big part of it is that we are so traumatized as a culture. And so instead of looking at it like we can get this help, we look at it like, this means that there's something wrong with us. And I do think that has a massive impact on people's decisions around choosing therapists. And then on top of it, not having a lot of therapists that look like you, right?
Ooh, I will drink to that. I will.
No, I was just wondering if like you think that there's like a lot of like this underlying shame that almost comes with when you're telling people. They automatically have like this, I don't know, like a self-shame type thing. Because I faced that too when I went to my family and told them that I was seeing a therapist. They kind of, I don't know if it makes them look at themselves and they kind of feel like ashamed, like, well, should I be seeing a therapist? Like, if she's doing something, is that something that you faced as well?
It's really interesting because I feel like there's a part of my family that like would outright say like therapy is great for you and it's great that you're getting therapy and I've done therapy or I've like been in therapy or I've all these things. But then, and also like these traumas come in where they start like within that same conversation are taking on this like shroud of shame around, what did I do to cause you to get there? And it's like,
right.
It's actually quite funny because in therapy, one of the conversations that we've had is around, it's not about what the outside world is doing because the outside world is going to do what it's going to do. It's really about how I perceive it. So it's not necessarily that my parents did something or my siblings did something or my grandparents did something. It's like all of those people did the best that they could with what they had. What's really more important is like how I perceived it and the long-term effects that it's had on me. Right. So so yes, to answer your question, I do think that there's just like this shame that comes with it. And the only way to kind of make it less is to just keep talking about it and keep normalizing it as much as possible, which is what I do. I like go to therapy and I'm like, therapy, it's like Disneyland for grownups. Like every time I have a therapy session, I like want to reinforce for people, like you get someone's one-on-one attention. Like I could sit there for an hour and just talk to this person and not feel bad about it. Like one-on-one attention. And she has to listen or whatever, So, so yeah.
Yeah, I find that a lot of the same, I think, experiences that you both have shared, I've had as well. Well, Claire, I mean, we have the same family, so I've had similar conversations with. That's why I kind of had to laugh because it definitely went the route of. Well, what is there something that I did to you to cause you to need this? And it's just like, did I break you in some way? And it's just like, no. Like every person's going to have some trauma. There's going to be some. Now, of course, varying degrees, I think, based on what your childhood was like or your experiences were like. But still, trauma is trauma.
Right.
So, exactly. But I definitely. Woo.
Well, I think too nowadays, like. Everybody, I say this often, I feel like everybody could benefit from therapy, like finding a good therapy, right? Or a therapist, something that's quality. But I say that because we all did just live through a pandemic. And no matter what you want to believe, like we all had some kind of trauma that was around that, like some people losing their jobs, some people realizing for the first time that they had to live with their partner all the time. Some people, like just these things and just like watching the nation and the world really at odds consistently all the time over the course of the last few years. And so I do think it's interesting how people take it on personally, but it's like, it's nothing to do with you. It's literally what's happening in the world all around us all the time. And then you add one thing in there that that I interpret in a way that I interpreted it. And that could be the straw that broke the camel's back, but it still has nothing to do with you, right? Like it's not your shame to carry.
So when you work with people who are trying to increase their PQ, but are just on the other side of trauma, how would you handle that?
Oh, I like this question. So there's very specific strategies that I utilize when I'm working with PQ. And I like to really focus where people are at as opposed to what I think is right. So, and that's been a transition and a learning in and of itself, right? Because at some point you want to be like, I can just make this happen for you if you just do this one thing, right? But some people are very attached to their trauma. Let me explain. So let's say, for example, you have a diagnosis, autoimmune disease, right? And you have this diagnosis and it's all you've ever known. And someone says to you, well, all you have to do is stop eating meat and you'll be fine. And all of a sudden, your whole identity is tied in to having an autoimmune disease. And this autoimmune disease has gotten you attention and it's gotten you care and it's gotten you love and it's gotten you whatever, right? And then someone's asking you to do this one thing. It seems so simple. Just give up meat. But then you have cultural ties to it. You have like you and your family always go and do this one thing. You have deeply rooted your life in this thing. So these two things all of a sudden become a part of who you are and your identity. So it doesn't make sense for me to say, yeah, just give up meat and you'll be fine, right? That could be something that sends someone over the edge. So, and I use those two things because I feel like they're like less traumatic than other topics that we could get into, and something that someone might, more easily understand, be able to digest and hear and understand around it. So what ends up happening is that we take a step back, and it's almost like focusing on what are you able and willing to do to help this be better. So if I say to you that you need to give up meat to help with your autoimmune disease, and that feels too big, could it just be that you have a smaller portion of meat? Could it be that, you know what I mean? And so that's similar to what I do with PQ. I really want to work with what people are able and willing to do. And you can look at someone's face when you're having a conversation with them and see what freaks them out. I was working with a client, for example, and we were trying to do a little bit of work around just like improving sleep. And she is hard set on, I am a night person and I don't get up early in the morning. I am a night owl. I am not an early bird. And I have a different idea and belief around like what's our sleep cycles are, and that I just the research that I've done on sleep. But I'm not going to tell her, well, you know what? Actually, you're wrong. There's no such thing as, early birds and night owls, because like that's a belief system. And that right away, as soon as we have this conversation or a difference of opinion, she can't hear what I say anymore anyway. Right. So it becomes, okay, can we just create a routine around your sleep? So you can go to sleep whenever time you want to. I'm not trying to tell you that you're not a night owl. I'm just saying that before you go to bed, could we wash your face, brush your teeth, and, put on a lavender diffuser so that you can start having a nightly routine? And then she was like, oh yeah, I can do that. That sounds great. Like there's no resistance. And I think a big part of the thing that people forget is that when we have trauma, if there's any resistance, oftentimes that little bit of resistance feels like I need to stand up for myself and fight. And I'm trying to do literally the opposite of like, let's take a step back and see this isn't working. So what's 1% incremental increase of improvement that we could do to find something that might potentially work?
I think that's so awesome. Especially with and I know it was an example, but I love what you said about, using food as an example, like just quit eating meat. Have you ever told a Creole woman to her face that you weren't going to eat her gumbo? Have you done it? Because I dare you. Because I dare you.
Yes.
But I think that was a great way to kind of simplify. It's like to you, it may be some small thing, but you have no idea what, and not even cultural significance, but what type of like family traditions that may be tied to it. And it's very, very hard, I think, for a lot of women, a lot of people, specifically women, I think more difficult than for women to break traditions or things that they've been told that they want or they should do or they should have. And which, side note, speaking of tradition, I saw something on Twitter the other day that said tradition is just peer pressure from dead people, which I found hilarious. And I had never looked at it that way, but that's it. Yes. Just peer pressure from dead people.
It's funny too, because one of the things that I love about tradition is this idea that, I do think that there's so much in tradition, but it's like, we don't have to just be living in tradition, right? Like, let's bring in there's modern times, and that's one of the things even in the yoga community that I talk about a lot is like, there's beautiful aspects of the tradition of yoga, but there's also some really sexist and non-inclusive things. So it can be both and,
Right.
Speaking of yoga, I do have a question. I know that a lot of, I had read somewhere and I had, done an interview with Dr. Whitney Griffin some time ago, who is a learning scientist who also teaches yoga. And she was talking about how trauma can be stored physically in the body. And as someone who is, an avid yogi, and by as someone, I mean you, I don't mean me, but as someone who is avidly into yoga, do you find that to be true? And is that something that you have experienced in your own journey with yoga? Because I know that, there was a time when you were just kind of getting into it to then being actually certified to now, being part of Solstice, which is freaking amazing. But
thank you.
Did you find that any of that in your experience? Because I know during that entire process, we both experienced a really big loss. A few of them, we took some heavy hits in our family.
Yeah.
When you were working through that, did you find that you were releasing things that had been physically pent up in you that you didn't notice before?
So yeah, it's funny because as you started the question, I was like, I'm just going to I had an experience that I wanted to share, but it wasn't a personal experience. And so, you brought it back. So let's tell my own stories. So, so it's interesting. They'll tell you often that you'll cry on the mat. And, random side note, I don't know if I was labeled, diagnosed, whatever, as a highly sensitive person, during my work with my therapist. And so now I'm like, well, I just cry off the mat, on the mat. I'm kind of teary all the time. Now that I've accepted that part of myself. But what happens oftentimes is that when you start working your body in a way that you've never worked it before, especially around yoga, which a lot of sports and other movement practices do this, but I have found it mostly in yoga because there is, in most poses, a stretch and a strengthening happening simultaneously. So you are getting a stretch in one muscle while you're getting a strengthening potentially in the opposite or opposing muscle sometimes, right? And so, or in other muscles. And so when that's happening, it's like you're opening up muscles that especially in the stretching aspect, that have not been stretched in a while. And when you start to stretch, those are the moments where the muscle starts to open up. I truly believe that there is energy that is stored in the muscles. And I think that gets thrown around in the yoga community often. But I've done a lot of research and work around what muscles are created or formed when and developed when. So I'm thinking I have an infant son right now, and just watching him learn how to roll, right? He's going from this fetal position to being able to now open up and stretch, and then he's able to now starting to roll. So there's his legs don't do anything. So his quads, for example, are not helping him do any forward momentum. And so it's not going to be until he starts crawling where we get that forward momentum that's happening from the quad. And that is actually the energy of the quad. So if you feel stuck and stiff, energetically in your life, I'm not making forward progress, I feel stuck in my job, I feel stuck in my relationships, everything's starting to feel stuck, you might find that doing a couple of quad opener stretches starts to feel really uncomfortable, get the shakes, you'll start getting shaky while you're opening up, and it might give you this energetic release of oh, I just need to XYZ thing that will, just it's almost like inspiration that happens on the mat. And it doesn't always happen quickly, but I do truly believe that when you start to pay attention to the energetics of the body, you'll notice that these things come up and are true. Another great example, the muscles of the of grief is the chest, right? Your chest muscles. And so you'll notice that when you are in grief, and I feel like this is a great one for this conversation, is that you tend to fold forward into yourself. So all the muscles in your chest are tightening up and the muscles in your back are spreading out. And so people over time who stay in grief and don't work through it will start to kind of be hunchbacked and rolled in on themselves. And it becomes really hard for them to do heart openers or back bends or things like that because everything is so contracted and tight. And so if you teach them or go through, let's say they come to a class and it's a back bending class and there's a lot of heart openers and a lot of stretching through the chest, they get emotional because these emotions that they've been storing in their chest, as grief starts to want to come out. And a lot of people refuse to do back bends. They are deep in fear, deep in their feelings around doing this back bend because it feels very vulnerable. They're opening up all of this emotional, energy that's stored up in their chest because for so long they've held on and been really attached to their sadness and their grief.
Wow.
Right?
Jeez.
So we had a few months back last year, we had an event for Grief and Color. It was called Cry That Shit Out. And basically it opened with grief and death education. And then we led into a short 30-minute yoga flow. And then it was ended by a sound bath. So when everyone was in Shavasana, we had a sound bath for everyone at the end to round out the event. And there were tears. It was absolutely beautiful. And I wasn't able to connect it in that way, but the way you said that, it's just like, huzzah. It makes so much sense. It's absolutely beautiful.
Well, that's the thing. I think a lot of the times that people just assume that grief, especially any type of emotion, really is purely just a mental thing, but they don't realize that emotions are stored in the body. So just with even listening to you talk about how grief is purely, because I didn't think about that. I'm thinking about like when I grieved my grandma, and a lot of the time when you're crying, you are in that hunched over position, right? So you're kind of in this position. So when you said that, I was just like, oh my God, I should have, put 2 and 2 together. And it's just like this, type of moment thing.
And the more you learn about it, it's really interesting. I've read a lot of books about just like what happens in the body and like how you can kind of work trauma through your body and things like that. But it's interesting because a lot of the things that we do in our natural life emulate emotions that we don't know. So again, like when we're sitting at our computers all day with this hunched over and we wonder why we have increased depression and increased like anxiety and like all of these things, but like we are putting ourselves in these positions where we're at our desk all day or playing on our phones all day, so that we're almost giving a similar closed off effect. Similarly with the psoas,
also like a muscle memory type thing, right?
Yeah. Alexis, same with the psoas. As soon as she said that,
I stood up. I'm like, let me check myself real quick.
I'm feeling it, but
I'm like, let me put my shoulders
But I love
back.
that though, because I think it's important that people remember that, like when you've been working for, like try to set a timer on your phone. You've been working for an hour, get up and like do some, it's simple, just like chest openers and like reach your shoulders up and back and like do those movements, because it's really funny if you're feeling frustrated or angry or, negative emotions at work. If you stand up, take a deep breath and open up your chest, you know what I mean? And just be like, okay, you'll feel a rush of energy. It's very powerful. Just the simplest movements.
I'm like, let me get up.
I'm definitely back. I definitely have my fingers interlocked behind my back right now. I'm trying to steadily be like,
I'm happy. I'm good.
Gotta make sure. I feel good.
Right, guys? Right?
Absolutely.
What are the main 3 things that you think are important to keep in mind when shepherding yourself through a grief state, but maintaining your balance?
The main 3.
Or I guess in order to maintain your balance.
Yeah. So patience. I think that we have this misconception, and I do feel like this is with most big emotions, but grief in particular, that it's supposed to be quick and that I should just get over this now. It happened a year ago. I should get over this now. And a really close to home example is that my first fiance passed away several years ago now. And we never got married, and we split before we got married, and he ended up marrying somebody else, and like we stayed in touch for a little bit, and then we didn't, and then he passed away. And when that happened, we weren't together, we weren't close, but it still affected me. And it's been several years since he died, and every now and again I'll dream about him, or I will think about him at like the oddest moments where it doesn't make sense to me that I'm thinking about him. And then I had a friend, this is gonna go far left, but just go with me. I had a friend whose daughter, Fernando and I we had worked together at a child care center. And so she was really little at that time. And so she is now grown, and she came back and she said, can I meet with you? I have a weird thing to talk to you about. And I'm like, oh, okay. Like, I'm pretty open to things, And so basically she had been in communication with Fernando, and she was like, he talks about you. And she said very specific things that like only he would know based on our relationship. So it was just a bizarre situation. But I say all that to say that grief can hit us in the strangest ways, but it never fully goes away. And I think the best example of someone that had shared once that like grief is like this box, and or like we're the box, and grief is like this ball on the inside, and at first it's hitting the corners or the sides of the box all the time, and over time the box gets a little bit bigger because you're experiencing more things in life, and the grief gets a little bit smaller because you're experiencing more things in life, but like the grief never fully goes away. And so having patience that the grief will shrink, but also going into number 2, having the understanding that it doesn't go away, I think is really important. So just knowing that like it's always there. You know, my grandparents passed away many years ago, and you know, I still think about them. Sometimes I still cry about them. I feel like there's things that I didn't like that went left unsaid, and so I have no expectation that like I'm gonna get to be 80 at some point and just completely like be okay with the fact that my grandparents passed away. You know what I mean? Like there's like it's always going to be a little bit painful that we didn't like. There's opportunities that were missed, right? Like there's opportunities that are missed by someone not physically being here. And then I think number 3, trusting that being patient and having the understanding that having the emotion is normal and healthy and okay and real and valid and whatever you need to hear to know that like to experience grief is okay. Like you're not bad or wrong or need to be in shame. Like no one can tell you the right amount of time or the right amount of grief to be experienced at whatever time, and just giving so much space for feeling. And for me in particular, just like I want the whole world to know that like we all experience emotions and we all experience them differently. And just because the way you're experiencing them doesn't look like the way XYZ person is experiencing them doesn't mean that you're doing it wrong. It's just you have an emotion, feel it, experience it. Because going back to the previous part of the conversation, if you don't allow yourself to express it and feel it and cry when you need to cry, you are going to store it in your body. And it's going to come out at some point. So it's like cry about it now or end up having, you know, back surgery later. And I know that sounds really extreme, but like it's like that. Like we're storing it in our body. You keep doing the same actions over and over again, and you wonder why you have a neck injury. You wonder why you have a back injury. So it's like, is it okay to cry about it now, or do I want to have a long-term effect later on? And I'm going to just encourage everybody to just experience the emotion now and preserve your body for as long as you can.
I feel like that's what we're going to name the episode. Cry about it now or have back surgery later.
That's a great name, actually.
Put that on a t-shirt. We're going to put that on some
because
merch.
It's facts.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, folks, we're going to take a quick break, get some refills, and we're going to come back and play a little game. This episode of Get Stiff is brought to you by Furwell Pets.
Losing a pet is hard. Not being greeted by happy barks or satisfied purrs after years of daily interactions can be devastating. Not really sure how to support someone who has experienced a pet loss? Furwell Pets gets it. Send them something to honor the memory of their pet. The Furwell My Friend Remembrance Bracelet is a subtle way to carry your pet's memory with you wherever you go.
Gemstone options include amethyst to support calm and rest, and tiger's eye to promote protection and clarity during this difficult time. Visit furwellpets.com to get yours today, or send one to comfort a friend. That's FURWELL pets.com. Furwell, my friend. Love lives on. All right. Are you guys ready?
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Okay. Doop, 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 doop. And we're back. So we are.
Oh, God.
Listen, I only had half a bagel for this, so this half of a cocktail that I've had has
it's kicking
nice.
in. It's kicking in.
Feeling nice.
Oh, boy.
All right. So we are back with Clair Thomas, and we are going to play a couple of cards from the Death Deck. Not an ad. I just really love this deck. So yeah, get yourself a deck. It's great. So This question is called Secret Ink. Claire, at the moment of death, a secret tattoo appears on your body that symbolizes something you stood for and believed in. What is it and where is it?
I feel like it's probably like right across my forehead, and it says, "This is just my face." I'm not mad. This is just my face.
This is just how I am.
Yeah, this is just how I am. Do you need more explanation than that? Or does that feel sufficient?
Okay. This is just my face. Okay.
Yes, this is my face. No, I'm not mad.
I'm not mad, just my face.
I think writing my own obituary is A, helpful. Nobody knows me like I do. B, conceited. Let my loved ones decide what to say. C, morbid. Why would I do that?
Well, I feel like part of me is like the A part where I'm like, obviously I don't share all my secrets, but then I know naturally what I would do is be like, Shannon, like, what did I represent? Who was I? So A/B?
There's a little A/B action.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Okay.
A little A/B testing.
Speaking of secrets that you have, this one is called Personal Belongings. Okay. Do you own any items, i.e. journals, videos, other compromising paraphernalia that you would not want discovered after your death? Who might you enlist to dispose of them and why?
So yes, I have every journal that I've ever written since I was a kid. And there were some rough years in there where I was like admitting to some stuff there. And who would I want to honestly, Shannon, I'd probably have you do it because you would probably enjoy it the most, and I know you would keep my secrets.
Yes, I have. That's now number 3. I have now. This is the 3rd. I've been enlisted 3 times. Adrian has enlisted me. And
so whatever reason, you are the most trustworthy. You are the most trustworthy in the Span family. I'll get to watch
it go up in flames. Well, Claire, I want to thank you so much for joining us. This has been a lot of fun. And would you like to tell the people where they can find you? Is there anything you have coming up that you'd like to plug?
Yeah, so you can find me on socials. I'm recently on TikTok, Blissful Clarity, and my IG is Blissful Clarity. But I also just recently started a YouTube channel, and that is where I'm diving in mostly to the positive intelligence PQ stuff. And so if that's interesting to you, my handle on the YouTubes is the Clair Thomas, no E in Claire.
Okay. And we will tag her in the comments as well, so you folks can keep up with Claire. As always, you can find me on Instagram at I Do Death.
You can find me same places, just Death with Lex.
And you can keep up with what we're doing with the show at Get Stiff Podcast on Instagram. This has been it. We've had a great time with you, Claire.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been fantastic.
As always, this is Get Stiff, Stiff Talk,
Stiff Drinks.
Good night, guys.
Good night.
Get Stiff is produced by Milan Reed. Do you have a topic you want to hear us get into? A drink recipe you'd like to recommend? Do you have a story to share? We want to hear from you. Get in touch at getstiffpodcast@gmail.com or reach out to us on Instagram at getstiffpodcast.